All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on Justin Trudeau. Like, did you know he was a boxing champion?
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not.
A boxing champion, or taught French and math. There's all sorts of things in here.
So that's what I find captivating about these sorts of public figures, is we all think we have a grasp on who they are from, headlines. But when you really dig in, there's often a much deeper story there. And, with Justin Trudeau, it really does start with his birth. Christmas Day to a sitting prime minister.
Boy.
That's only happened twice in Canadian history.
Can you imagine the Christmas dinner conversations at that house?
Right.
It's like he was destined for politics,
It's almost as if history was repeating itself. This unique birth set the stage for a life that would be intertwined with Canadian politics, and it carried the weight of legacy from the very beginning.
And speaking of legacy, his ancestry is mind-blowing. Scottish, French, Canadian, and even a link to the founding of Singapore through his mom's family.
Wow.
Right. It's a serious mix of cultures.
Fascinating how that diverse heritage kind of is reflected in his political career. Throughout his time in office, he championed a multicultural mosaic, seemingly mirroring his own background.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting. Picture this. A young Justin Trudeau, toasted by Richard Nixon. U.S. president at the time is the future Prime Minister of Canada.
Wow.
Talk about foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's right. Adds an almost mythical quality to his early years. However, we should consider the immense pressure that would come with such expectations. It's a double-edged sword that's going to shape his path in ways that, we can only speculate about.
Yeah, that kind of preordained destiny, it can't be easy to kind of grow up with. And then factor in the other events of his childhood. Moving between official residences, the very public separation of his parents, and the heartbreaking loss of his brother Michel in an avalanche.
These experiences undoubtedly contributed to his resilience and the empathy that he often displayed as a leader. These shaped his approach to life and eventually his political career.
So from those really kind of formative years, we jump ahead to his career path. And it's not your typical politician's resume. We're talking substitute teacher, boxing champion, youth advocate.
Yeah.
It's like this guy wore a lot of hats.
Exactly, and that diversity is key here. These roles likely honed his communication skills, especially his ability to connect with people from all walks of life, which became a defining trait of his leadership style.
Yeah, and let's not forget that he even started an engineering degree before eventually finding his way into politics. Although there's that incident from 2000, the unsigned editorial about an alleged incident at the Kokanee Summit Music Festival. A bit of a cloud hanging over his early years.
Yeah, this incident highlights the intense scrutiny public figures face, particularly those with a famous last name like Trudeau. And it's that thing where the past has a way of resurfacing, even when the details are unclear or disputed.
Yeah, speaking of that famous last name, stepping into his father's footsteps must have come with a mountain of expectations.
Absolutely. The weight of his father's legacy undoubtedly played a role in his political journey. It's a story of both embracing that legacy and forging his own path.
And forge his own path he did. In 2015, he wins the election, becomes the second youngest prime minister ever, and forms a majority government. It's a pretty impressive start, wouldn't you say?
Especially considering the historical significance of his win in Quebec, it seemed he was able to connect with voters in a way that his predecessors couldn't.
So he's prime minister, what's next? Well, on the domestic front, there were economic measures, social initiatives like legalizing cannabis, and his commitment to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It's a lot to cover.
And it's crucial to analyze both the successes and the challenges of his time in office. For example, introducing a national childcare program was a massive achievement, but housing affordability became a major concern during his tenure.
Yeah, and then there's that controversy surrounding the invitation of a former Nazi soldier to Parliament. Talk about a political misstep. That one definitely made headlines.
Yeah, yes. It highlighted the need for careful vetting and sensitivity towards historical events, emphasizing the weight of every decision made on the political stage.
On the global scene, Trudeau had to navigate relationships with both Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Talk about contrasting personalities. He also renegotiated NAFTA and witnessed a significant deterioration in relations with China.
It's a reminder that foreign policy is a delicate balancing act, constantly evolving in response to global shifts and the personalities involved. Trudeau's emphasis on diplomacy and multilateralism certainly faced its share of challenges.
Yeah, and speaking of challenges, There were his efforts to counter alleged Chinese interference in Canadian elections. It became a huge topic, raising questions about election integrity and security in the digital age.
This issue has implications far beyond Canada, highlighting the need for democracies worldwide to grapple with these emerging threats and safeguard their electoral processes.
Now, no deep dive into Justin Trudeau would be complete without addressing the controversies that followed him throughout his time in office.
It's important to examine these events with a critical eye, understanding both the accusations and the justifications provided. These controversies raise complex questions about ethics and power dynamics within the political sphere.
So let's start with those cash for access fundraising events. They definitely raised eyebrows, with some questioning the ethical implications, while Trudeau maintained they were within the rules.
This sparked a broader debate about the influence of money in politics, a topic that resonates not just in Canada but globally. It raises fundamental questions about transparency and accountability in democratic systems.
Then there's the Aga Khan affair, where Trudeau became the first sitting prime minister found in violation of federal conflict of interest laws. That's a pretty significant blow.
It was a major setback for his reputation, raising concerns about his judgment and adherence to ethical standards. It also highlighted the importance of upholding those standards for everyone, regardless of their position.
And who could forget the SNC-Lavalin scandal? The allegations of pressure on the Attorney General, the release of that secret recording of the phone call between Jody Wilson-Raybould and Michael Wernick. It was political drama at its peak. The SNC-Lavalin affair revealed the tension between political considerations and the independence of the justice system. It sparked discussions about the limits of executive power and the importance of transparency in decision-making processes. And then there's the WE charity scandal. Although he was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing, it seems like controversies were a recurring theme throughout his time in office.
These repeated ethical questions, whether perceived or real, inevitably eroded public trust. Even when investigations didn't lead to formal charges, it underscores the immense impact public perception can have on a political career, especially in the age of instant information.
All of this is the controversies, the declining poll numbers, the by-election losses, and a wave of cabinet resignations ultimately culminated in his resignation in January 2025.
His deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, resigning seemed to be the final straw. It's a stark reminder that even the most charismatic leaders are not immune to political realities and the shifting tides of public opinion.
Amidst the political turmoil, he also announced his separation from Sophie Gregoire Trudeau. A reminder that behind the public persona, there's a personal life that's just as complex.
It humanizes the political figure, showing that they too experience the same personal challenges and transitions as everyone else. It adds another layer to the narrative of his life, one that's often overshadowed by the political spotlight.
And throughout it all, his religious beliefs have been an evolving part of his story, from a lapsed Catholic to rediscovering his faith.
Interesting counterpoint to the often secular world of politics. It demonstrates that even in positions of power, individuals continue to grapple with fundamental questions of faith and spirituality.
So we've covered a lot of ground here: the triumphs, the trials, the controversies. It's a complex and fascinating story. And it leaves us with some big questions. What will Justin Trudeau's legacy be? What impact did he truly have on Canada? And where does Canada go from here?
Those are the questions we're going to delve into next. Stay tuned for part 2, where we unpack the lasting impacts of his time in office and explore the challenges and opportunities facing Canada in the post-Trudeau era.
So we've explored the life and career of Justin Trudeau, but what about his legacy? How will history remember his time as Prime Minister? It's a complex equation with a lot of variables.
You're absolutely right. It's not a simple answer. Did he live up to those early expectations? Did his progressive ideals translate into lasting change? It's a debate that'll likely continue for years to come.
Let's start unpacking it. Domestically, one of his signature achievements has to be the Canada Child Benefit. It lifted so many children out of poverty.
It's widely regarded as one of his most impactful policies. Think about it. A program designed to directly address child poverty, reduce inequality. That's a bold move. It had a real tangible impact on families across the country.
And then there's the legalization of cannabis. Canada became only the second country in the world to do that. It was a controversial decision, but it certainly put Canada on the map as a leader in drug policy reform. What do you think the long-term effects of that decision will be?
That's a great question. The full impact of legalization is still unfolding. Researchers are studying its effects on public health, crime rates, and the economy. It's a social experiment on a grand scale, and it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out in the coming years.
But then we have to talk about the housing crisis. It's an issue that's been plaguing Canada for years, and it seemed to intensify during Trudeau's time in office.
It's true that housing affordability became a major concern, with prices skyrocketing in many cities. While Trudeau's government implemented measures like the Housing Accelerator Fund and the foreign buyers ban, the situation remained a challenge throughout his tenure. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
And then there's his work on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. He made it a priority, launching the National Inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But did he truly deliver on his promises?
Reconciliation is an ongoing process, and while Trudeau's government took steps in the right direction, many Indigenous communities felt that progress was too slow. There's a sense that the gap between words and actions remained, despite his stated commitment to addressing systemic inequalities.
It's a reminder that tackling deep-rooted issues like colonialism and discrimination requires sustained effort and a genuine commitment to listening to the voices of those affected.
Absolutely. It's about more than just policy pronouncements. It's about building trust and working collaboratively to create meaningful change.
Now, shifting gears to foreign policy, you can't ignore the bromance with Obama. They seem to be on the same page when it came to international relations. Do you think those days will be missed on the world stage?
Trudeau and Obama certainly shared a similar approach to diplomacy and multilateralism. However, the global landscape shifted dramatically with the rise of populism and protectionism. The challenges Trudeau faced with the Trump administration highlighted these stark differences in approach.
Renegotiating NAFTA was no walk in the park either, was it? Trump's threats of tariffs and demands for concessions created a lot of tension.
It was a high-stakes negotiation, and Canada had to make compromises, particularly in the dairy sector, to secure the new trade deal now known as CUSMA. It was a balancing act between protecting Canadian interests and maintaining a vital economic relationship with the United States.
And then there's the diplomatic crisis with China. Following the arrest of Meng Wanzhou and the detention of the two Michaels, it really put a strain on the relationship, didn't it?
That situation exposed the complexities and vulnerabilities of Canada's relationship with China. It was a delicate situation that required careful navigation, and Trudeau faced criticism from both sides for his handling of it.
It's a reminder that in a world of shifting geopolitical power dynamics, navigating international relations requires a strategic approach, a willingness to stand up for your values, and the ability to make tough choices.
Precisely. And it's a challenge that'll likely continue to be a priority for future Canadian leaders.
So we've talked about his policies, both domestic and foreign. But the controversies surrounding Trudeau's time in office can't be ignored. Let's revisit them. The Aga Khan vacation, where he was found in violation of conflict of interest laws, definitely tarnished his image.
Being the first sitting prime minister found in violation of those laws was a significant blow to his reputation. Regardless of intent, it raised concerns about judgment and accountability, even if he maintained he had not intentionally broken any rules.
And then the SNC-Lavalin affair. With those allegations of political interference in a criminal prosecution, that one really shook things up, didn't it?
It did. The SNC-Lavalin scandal sparked a national debate about the boundaries between politics and the justice system. It also led to the resignation of two high-profile cabinet ministers and further fueled public distrust in the government.
And of course, the WE charity scandal. Even though he was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, it seemed like one controversy after another.
These recurring ethical questions, regardless of their outcome, inevitably chip away at public trust. It reinforces the need for transparency and ethical conduct at all levels of government.
So how do these controversies impact Trudeau's legacy? Do they overshadow his achievements?
That's a question historians will grapple with for years to come. It's difficult to separate the policy successes from the ethical missteps. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to weigh the evidence and form their own conclusions.
It's a reminder that leadership is complex, and even those with the best intentions can falter.
You're right, it's a constant balancing act between ambition ideals and the realities of governing.
All right, so we've explored Trudeau's legacy, the successes, the challenges, and the controversies that defined his time in office. But what about the future of Canada? What happens now?
That's the question on everyone's mind, isn't it? What happens in the post-Trudeau era? What are the challenges and opportunities that await the next prime minister?
Big questions for sure. And those are the questions we'll explore in part 3 of our deep dive. We'll analyze the issues facing Canada, the potential paths forward, and what it all means for you. Stay tuned. So we've talked about his journey, his impact, and now I guess we got to look ahead. What's next for Canada? I mean, the new prime minister is stepping into some pretty big shoes.
It's a pivotal moment for Canada. Yeah, the decisions that are made in the coming years will have a ripple effect on the country's future, both domestically and internationally.
So what's top of the agenda? Like, what are the pressing issues that need to be addressed, like, right away?
Well, the economy's got to be a major concern. We talked about housing affordability. But inflation is still a challenge, putting pressure on families and businesses. So the new prime minister is going to have to find a way to stabilize the economy without stifling growth. And it's a tricky balance.
Yeah, and you can't forget about, like, the global context either. I mean, the war in Ukraine, rising energy prices, ongoing supply chain disruptions. They're all adding to this really volatile economic landscape. I mean, the whole world feels on edge, and Canada's not immune to those pressures.
Right, exactly. The new leader will need to navigate these really choppy waters carefully, finding ways to protect Canadian interests while also engaging constructively on the global stage.
Another issue that we got to talk about, I think, is climate change. We're seeing the effects firsthand. Increasingly frequent and intense weather events, wildfires, floods, heat waves. I mean, it's a stark reminder that this isn't some far-off problem. It's happening right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Climate change demands immediate action. Canada has made commitments to reduce emissions, but the new prime minister needs to accelerate those efforts and find innovative solutions to balance environmental protection with economic growth.
And then there's the ongoing journey of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It's been such a long road, and progress has been so frustratingly slow. What needs to happen to kind of move beyond just words and towards meaningful action?
I think it's about addressing systemic inequalities, ensuring that Indigenous voices are at the forefront of decision-making. The new prime minister has to prioritize collaboration, build trust, and work towards a future where Indigenous communities are empowered and their rights are fully respected.
So it's time to shift from promises to tangible change.
Absolutely. Reconciliation requires a sustained commitment and a willingness to listen and learn from Indigenous communities. It's a process that demands action, not just words.
Okay, so we got the economy, climate change, reconciliation. What about healthcare? It's a system that seems to be constantly under strain.
You're right. Canada's healthcare system is facing a number of challenges. An aging population, a growing shortage of healthcare workers, and those infamous wait times. Finding ways to improve access to care, address burnout among healthcare professionals, and ensure the long-term sustainability of the system is going to be crucial.
It's like a complex puzzle with a lot of moving pieces, and it's something that affects every single Canadian.
Precisely. Access to quality healthcare is a fundamental right, and the new prime minister will need to make it a priority.
Finally, let's talk about Canada's role in the world. With so much global uncertainty, the rise of authoritarianism, what kind of leadership should Canada be showing on the international stage?
Well, Canada has always been a champion of human rights and multilateralism. The new prime minister has an opportunity to build on that legacy, standing up for democratic values, working collaboratively with allies to address global challenges. It's about finding that balance between promoting Canadian interests and contributing to a more just and peaceful world.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive into the life and times of Justin Trudeau. And it feels like we've gone from the personal to the political, and now to the future of Canada itself.
It has. We explored his upbringing, his rise to power, his policies and controversies, and now the challenges and opportunities facing the nation as it enters a new chapter.
And for you, the listener, this isn't the end of the story. We've just scratched the surface. It's up to you to continue exploring, to stay informed, and to engage in the conversations that'll shape Canada's future.
Think of this as a starting point. Dig deeper into the issues we've discussed. Seek out diverse perspectives. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions. The future of Canada is something we all have a stake in shaping.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.